Alright, in this video and upcoming videos that I'll make into a series, I'm going to talk about basically dysfunctional people, dysfunctional family, dysfunctional environment, what some call toxic people. Some say are behaviors of a cluster B, narcissistic, histrionic, borderline, and antisocial. And some people connect those to psychopathic people and sociopathic people, some do not. But I'm going to discuss that, and through my own experiences, I'm finally feeling more comfortable in that I won't basically keep triggering myself and going back through trauma. But I'm going to discuss, talk about these and elaborate, and it's more of a you're not alone, and make sure you read the disclaimer in the description box below this video on YouTube. This is not any kind of form of advice, counseling advice, anything along that line, and don't follow my lead. One size does not fit all, and whatever you do or don't do is, you pay the consequences of your own actions and inactions. And there's more to that, of course. But like I said, I'm going to start off talking about these things, but I'm going to start off at childhood. So much starts off at childhood. So I'm going to start there, and with my own situation. Or rather, what I basically went through. Now, like I said, I'm going to start very early. First off, my mother, she experienced postpartum depression after she had me. Now, I'm not saying all mothers who suffer from postpartum depression do these things. I'm saying my mother did. And I was the fourth child out of 5, and she had me 15 months after one of my other siblings. And like I said, she suffered from postpartum depression for the first time after me. She never got over it. This is a woman who, when I was born, she hid knives because she was afraid she was going to use them on me. Okay, from the time I was born. My dad worked full-time, but he was the one who basically took care of me. And I'm thinking my maternal grandmother, her mother, did. She had been a nurse before she had my mother, and she and my grandfather lived next door, my maternal grandparents, from our house. They had our house built actually when I was 2 years old, but they lived down the road, just down the road, after I was born, from where we lived then. And so I think that she was the one that took care of me most of my very early childhood, and until I was capable of basically taking care of myself. And my mother was, she was neglectful, very. When I say she never got over it, I mean she never even wanted to know that I existed. Okay, it was claimed she experienced it again after my next sibling, but no, nothing like she experienced it with me. So, okay, now, when I was probably, I don't know how, maybe 5, somewhere around there, I was walking into my mom's bedroom, my mom and dad's bedroom, and my grandmother, her mother, was in there, and with my mother. And there was a big, I think they called them hutches, really huge hutches, was in there, and as I was walking, I heard them talk, so I was about to turn around, I was very much like that as a child, but I heard what my mother said, and it made me stop and pause. She was talking about me. She basically said that me being born caused my sibling that she had just before me to lose their childhood, and that it was my fault for being born. Okay, imagine a young child hearing their mother say that it was my fault. Okay, now as some people know, neglect is a form of abuse. Okay, it is abuse. And with my mother, she also suffered from, I truly believe, agoraphobia. She was, I think, from what we heard, we really didn't hear much, but she suffered from anxiety, and she did not want to leave the home. Okay, she did not want to leave her room. She wanted to stay in there she had 5 children living in the house with her and my dad, And at one point, like when I was in high school, her parents lived there too because of health conditions. But she just wanted to stay in her room. She did not want to come out. She did not like to cook. She wasn't a mean woman now. She wasn't like, vicious, mean, or anything. But she was neglectful. She didn't teach me things, any of us, I don't think. Maybe one sibling. Things like, such as a child, teaching the child personal hygiene, how to brush your teeth, how to bath, shower, wash your hair, do all that. No. What I learned from my siblings, whatever they did, I've kind of just followed. I don't even know. I don't know whomever taught me how to brush my teeth. Okay, I think much of it was in school. I remember classes we all had to go to, and they had little special classes or special films or something, and they would teach us things. It was pretty bad. But I think most of what I had learned at all and through my childhood was from school. Okay, that's where we learn things. Now, about my dad, okay. Now, my dad was a very abusive man, period. That's just plain and simple. He was very abusive, and we all know that abuse is not just physical, but for him, it was physical and so forth and so on. Now, some people think physical abuse is just physical abuse. No. Is there not at least an emotional abuse to it? I see physical abuse and emotional abuse can be together. Oh, sorry, I'll have to pause a second. Okay, pardon me. That was the puppy, my new puppy, I nicknamed Mayhem. And he was a little upset that the bigger dog, the older dog, Marmaduke, would not wake up. So the jingle is the puppy's collar. I put a bell on so I'll know where he is, at least most of the time. But you might hear him quite often. Yeah, he's a very active dog. Okay, now my dad was, like I said, an abusive man. He came from a dysfunctional family. His dad was an alcoholic, which my dad would never drink because of. And his mother died from a brain tumor when he was, I think, 14. And his dad basically told him, "You're on your own, sonny boy." And he went and lived with his dad's, I think his mother's parents or grandparents, and I think parents. And he had two siblings, two sisters, and they did too, but he was told he had to live out in the barn. Okay. And they were very wealthy people, but they just were neglectful toward him. And basically he had to work and, try to find money and get money and stuff like that. But that was his childhood. My mother, she was an only child. Okay, now remember, I'm not generalizing this over to anybody else, or like somebody grew up as an only child, they were this way, or they were kicked out of their home as an early child, they're going to be this way, in their teenage years or whatever. No, this is just my story. And anyway, my mother was an only child, and her mother seemed to be very controlling, basically controlling. Her father was the best person I've ever known in my whole life. Seriously, my grandfather, maternal grandfather. Kind, sweet. He was normal. I'm going to use that word, normal. Okay, now to turn it back to my dad. He was a very tall man, 6 foot. He only admitted to being 6'7", and very muscular. And my mother, when she had dementia, would say that he was a pituitary giant. But from what I've ever heard of them, they have to be at least 7 feet tall. But he did have a lot of problems, diabetic, type 1, and so on and so forth. But he was, like I said, very abusive. He believed in spare the rod, spoil the child, and just for the record, that's not in the Bible. In fact, there's something in the Bible about not mistreating your sheep. Okay, now, but he believed in that, and he was this big man, and when he would take off the belt, I would go to school with welts on me, and like across my arm, my back, wherever, and that's how he thought he was supposed to do. That was in his mind. And we can have a whole long discussion on that one. Believe me, I can go into detail. And that continued on. I seemed to be the chosen one, okay, out of the 5 of us, his children. And he was very, like I said, very abusive with it. And when I was 12 years old, I had had enough. Okay, now, I should talk about what that caused first. Okay, basically what it caused was for me to develop an adrenal disorder very early in life. I have a picture of me when I was a toddler, when I was this little blonde-haired girl, real cute. But after that, all the pictures you see me as very tall and developing into, well, I'll go into that more detail because of the adrenal disorder. Various problems. They never took me to a doctor. I did not find out I had one until I was, I think, 37 years old. I'm 56 now. And that is something that they cannot operate on. It's too risky to operate on. I've had that verified by endocrinologists and, what's the other one? But I had it verified more than once. And it's something that I suffer with every day of my life because of his abuse and her abuse. Every day of my life, and I always have and I always will, ever since then. So that's what that kind of behavior caused in me. And basically, I have a moment-by-moment reminders of this abuse because of all the medications I have to take all day long, 4 times a day. I have to remember them. I set one of them on an alarm on my phone to remind me, because that's the main one. And I am reminded the way I am treated, what I go through on a daily basis. It's all connected. It's all connected. But to get to that, when I was 12 years old and had experienced physical abuse, like I say, I don't see it as just physical, but physical abuse by this big man. At 12 years old, I said, that's it. And as a 12-year-old that had been neglected and didn't know, was never really taught by anybody certain words or things. But at 12 years old, what had happened was he got mad at me for something. And I was not like some think a scapegoated child is one who's very, does things wrong on purpose. No. I was the perfect little angel, and I really actually was very, not perfect, but rather angelic, because of the fear of anything that I do, I'm going to be in trouble and I'm going to be beaten, okay? Not spanked, beaten. I think of people as spanking a child, I think of that as beaten too, but I'm talking very beaten, okay? But like I said, 12 years old, that was it. I'd had enough. And what he did was, we were in the laundry room, and he came up to me, this huge man, and I was already a tall girl by then, and I've always been rather strong-bodied since, probably around that time. And he hit me. He hit me very hard. And when he hit me, it threw me up against the washer and dryer. Okay, I'm saying both of them because it was kind of like in the middle. I have a very vivid memory of this. And it of course, hitting me on the side and hitting me so hard that I basically came up, as I, think of the story, I see it as I came up fighting mad. And for me, it has always been, and probably always will be, verbal. I came back very angry at him and told him that, sorry, puppy, that if he ever touched me, ever again, I would report him to the authorities. Now, at 12 years old, like I was saying, I didn't know what the authorities were. I was so neglected. And I actually said the wrong thing. And for years, when I would remember that, I would feel humiliated without, I'm not telling anybody, I'm telling myself, I'm reminding myself, flashback, that just by saying the wrong thing, because that's how much of my life was. If I misused a word or didn't have the correct name for something, I was humiliated. And that's where this went from. I threatened him. I threatened him to get him put in prison. And he stopped. He stepped back. This big, huge man stepped back, and he just was shocked that I had said that. Well, after that moment, that is when I learned about humiliation, very major humiliation. That's what he turned to, since he knew I was not lying. I was going to turn him in if he ever touched me again. So, so he turned to that, humiliating me at every turn. And he wasn't the only one now. I was in a household, I was the fourth child. And with people, as many of us know, it could develop in other siblings, or even cousins and so forth. When they see something like that, some of them may pick up those behaviors. Okay, I had a pause for complete and total mayhem and Marmaduke's breakfast. I had to feed him, let him out, well, Marmaduke out. Whew, I'm out of breath after that. But, so I'm not sure where I was. I think I was talking about, that's when I first started really learning about humiliation, which seems to be the game that many of them like. I'm not diagnosing anybody, none of this is a diagnose of anything, one size doesn't fit all anyway. But some would say, narcissistically abusive, I guess, people, that they'll turn to humiliation once they find out that they maybe are threatened prison, okay? And I'm talking things like when, like I said, I have this adrenal disorder. Always have been, since I guess it started, very tall, strong-built woman, and he would say things to people like total strangers. Like one time at a hospital, he pointed, I was standing there, and I walked up, and he told the nurses that were there. He was very charismatic and had followers, and then the nurses there were out there talking to him outside. And he told him, this is my little daughter. And he laughed and said, well, she's not so little anymore. And his sarcasm was very obvious, at least to me, because he would do things like that pretty much all the time. Okay? Anytime he found me in public, didn't matter. And Mayhem is trying to tear up my microphone, so hold on. Okay, Mayhem is in the background making this noise. That's his timeout box. He can get out of it, and he did. And he's trying to tear it up. But anyway, so that's the noise you're hearing. I was recording and didn't realize I hadn't pushed record yet. But basically, at some point, as I got older, my dad was really bad about this kind of thing. And when I was 15 years old, I remember this vividly. It's just flashback, becomes flashbacks. My cousin, he was an older man, and he worked for an older than us, basically. He had already had his own house, his wife, his job. He worked in entertainment for a really popular TV show back then. And he had money. And he had a swimming pool, and we would be invited every once in a while. One time he had a party, and we were invited. Now, my dad was very strict about things, and I don't think he liked the fact that people were drinking at this party. But anyway, and we went there. We would swim and stuff like that in the swimming pool. Well, I knew how to swim because my dad believed in sink or swim, literally. When I was a very young child, he threw me and my sister, that's just older than I, he threw us in the deep end of a swimming pool, seriously, and said, sink or swim. I swam, my sister sunk. He had to dive in, get her out. So I knew how to swim from very young. But I wasn't the type, I was by then certainly suffering from panic attacks, certainly, even before then, really. And, so I was at the pool, and I was looking at it, and I was kind of, I was 15 years old, and I was thinking, I don't know, there's so many people in there, and I don't know if I want to jump off that end, the deep end over there, because there's so many people, and, my brain was working, okay? Now, my personal experience with people like that are abusive like that, their brains usually aren't working. They're not very analytical. they really run off of the hatred. That's how I see it. I could be wrong. I'm not saying this is something scientific here, although my degrees are in psychology and sociology. But yeah, this is just my view on this. My experiences, my observations, is that they're not all that smart. They're not the brightest bulb in the chandelier kind of thing. But they run off this hatred, this inner hatred, and they take it out on anybody they can, often finding a target. Now, some people might say that's more of a psychopath. And I want to say something about this. When I was a student, remember I'm 56, when I was a undergraduate student at university, one of the things I was talking about, the difference between psychopath and sociopath, yeah, people have various views, and I think it's actually kind of changed over time, over all these many years, to way people define the differences between a psychopath and a sociopath. Okay, now the difference I heard way back then, if memory serves, and it pretty much does, is that a psychopath, it's like the difference between psychology and sociology. Okay, and the psychopath generally picks one person, at a time, we could say. This is their focus, their target right now. Okay, is this one person. And a sociopath doesn't care, would go after, think about mass shootings. Okay, this is a sociopath. They just go for many. It's pretty much like the difference between, like I said, psychology, sociology. Say counselors, they have a client. They might take into consideration the family and the stories this person's telling about families and stuff, but their focus is that, psychologists, focus is that person, that client, the counselor is their focus on that client. Now, sociologists take in the whole. Okay, all the systems, all the institutions, all everything. Okay, they take it all in. So that would be the difference, as I said. But then it turned into towards the difference is psychopaths are born with it, and sociopaths are raised to become it. I disagree with that one. Now, for a while, I did consider there might be might be right. I could be wrong on this. But I think they're basically saying psychopaths are genetically vulnerable to become a psychopath, and sociopaths are not. I disagree. I think nature nurture, I know the whole nature nurture. When I was graduating as a graduate student, I think, in sociology, there was another one too that was coming up, another view other than nature nurture or a combination. It was something else. I don't remember what that was, something else. It was a new thought. But anyway, I put more emphasis on nurture, except there are some disorders that are nature, that are biological, some kind of imbalance, But something like this, I just disagree. I don't think of psychopaths as, somebody, they were born with it. Yeah, you can look into a family and see somebody else who behaves that way. But guess what? You can do that on sociopaths. You can do that on, any kind of antisocial behavior, like any cluster B, okay? Anybody. You can see more than one, such as with mine, okay? Yeah. And I remember as a child thinking, why is it that some people have all this bad stuff in their family, their parents, but some turn out good and some turn out bad? And I was a child. Okay, I was already thinking about this. And I've seen this in many, many instances throughout my life. Okay, not just with family, but there's also environment. If you grow up, it doesn't have to be your family. You can grow up in a dysfunctional environment. And eventually I'm going to start talking more about that. But I have a lot of videos I want to make from here. And I'm not going to get every detail right, and I'm not going to mention everything, of course. I can't go through that many years and remember everything. And sometimes your brain rewrites history, especially that many years later. But so back to this. I would wonder if he was a psychopath. Seriously. To have such a focus on me that was so negative. And I think one part of it was that he was trying to make me his golden child. Because I was talking about that swimming pool thing. Now, to get back to that. He actually said this to me, a girl, 15-year-old girl. Okay, now, when I was standing at the swimming pool and I was thinking all that, my brain was working and I was saying, yeah, that might not be a good idea, and plus I could get hurt and other people could get hurt, along this line, and being logical. My dad, in front of all these people, said, loud enough for them to hear, that he had hoped that I was going to be the son he never had. Okay, a 15-year-old girl does not want to hear that. And with all these people, plus hearing, all these people hearing it, plus just doesn't want to hear something like that. And I'm going to tell you, he hasn't had a son, the first child. But there's more to that story too, which I guess I could basically sum up is my brother was the firstborn, but he had a traumatic brain injury. Now we heard various stories. The firstborn child, the rest of us, all female, heard various stories around, along the years. Think about that. Yeah, and basically we were told that during birth, the doctor used a forceps and crushed his head. That was one story. We were also told a story about my mom had gum problems, toothaches and stuff like that, and she was on a medication for it. We heard all kinds of stories. No, I don't think anybody really knows the truth. They're both past, my parents and my grandparents, so who knows? Who really knows the truth? But, so he felt like, that's mayhem again. Oh boy. Okay, so you see my dad's view was that his son that had the traumatic brain injury was not really his son. Okay, imagine all these things that I learned so young about the bad side of human behavior, seriously, and the views that people have of what is worth and what is not. Okay, now there's so many stories I could tell just from my childhood, dealing with an absent, neglectful mother who was, like I said, that's neglect. That's abuse. And a dad who was physically and emotionally and then verbally abusive. And that's not all of it. But I could tell many stories about that. And I do plan on continuing on making other videos on this topic. Like I said, I finally feel free to do so. And hopefully we won't have too much mayhem happening during each one, but I like to make the videos in the morning, and mayhem when he wakes up decides that's the best time of the day to play. So, yeah. But, like I said, I have a lot of these stories, and some of it just still to this day, at this day and age, and I've been to counseling, and I've gone through this, more than one counselor along these years, because I used to move around a lot. But, it affects so much of my life. And this is known that generally, not everybody, nothing one size fits all. We all know that people who grow up in something like that, where it's very abusive, and I'm not going to sit there and define each one, but they tend to continue on. They get people in their lives. Some used to say that marriage was like this, that people were trying to work out the problems that they had with the most abusive person in their life, or someone they wanted to didn't get a chance to find closure or to deal with their issues and get through the issues, work through it from their childhood. Okay, they generally think of that as a parent. It could also be a sibling. That used to be the main thought on this. I don't know if it still is today. People still say that you marry somebody that you're trying to work out a problem with that you never were able to before. But on that, I got married at age 18. Yeah, I had just gotten out of my family home, and there are so many more stories attached to that. But really, yeah, I married at age 18. That's way too young. And is that true? Well, stay tuned for other videos to come up. That is, if I don't get, feel like later on this was just too much. You know what I'm saying? Because, yeah, remembering all these in the past, that could happen. But I plan on making more and more videos. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Talk to you on another video. Bye.